Okay, let's get started. So, new year, new legislation. We don't plan it this way, but every October we end up having to introduce the new laws that are coming in January of the following year. It's almost become an autumn habit. Just before we start, I'm not a lawyer. This does not constitute legal advice in any way whatsoever, but it's helpful to be reminded of some of the changes that are coming that we have to be mindful of in our practice. There is this year a theme, I think, to everything, which is transparency, accountability. And we'll see that as we go through. A lot of the legislation that's coming in January, not as much as we've had in previous years, will be around reporting. And so I think if you're like me, a data professional, that's going to have an impact on your work. All of this work on data ethics is paying off. I've been involved in this a long time. I know the people who have campaigned for different laws on this over the decades, more than 10 years. This was a figure that Gartner published last week, actually. I think the actual figure was a confidence boundary. It was 62 to 68. This is how many data leaders said today, autumn 2025, they are prioritizing governance over introducing AI because, the figures for fines for data breaches have reached over €1 billion now for single incidents, not repeated incidents, but single incidents. And so the impact, I guess, has been effective. We wanted to make sure that companies took these things seriously, and 65% say they are taking it very seriously. Some of the legislation next year, especially here in the UK, is to soften actually the threat of those $1 billion, those €1 billion fines. We will come to that in a moment. But really, 2026, it's about making sure you are ready to report, be transparent, be held accountable. We're going to start in Europe. So the EU AI Act is nothing new, but it's something that was always planned to be phased in over a 2-year period, and we are coming up to some milestones. Unacceptable risks, which mostly have impacted governments, not that many of us, some of us work in government, would be impacted by that. We did see in August the voluntary obligations for generative AI providers. And we saw a couple of organizations, Google noticeably declared and met their obligations. I don't know if you had a look at it. I found it very difficult to interpret and read, especially around things like carbon reporting. There were so many different conditions and terms, and it was very, very challenging. But nonetheless, we have started. So we've got some transparent reporting on that, and we hope to get more transparent reporting on how these machines are trained, not just because the law requires it, but we've been successful in encouraging people to ask for it as well, which is a really big part of this. Full enforcement won't be in place until 2028, so we've still got some time before we get the secrets behind these machines. I think we'll see it sooner. We have a really big one coming in August, so this is one to be ready for if you are in a high risk system, and you can actually quite easily fall into that if you work in mortgages, homes, education, health. A lot of sectors are high risk. That's coming into effect in August, so you've got less than a year to get ready for that if you're not yet prepared. And of course, extended compliance deadlines for come into place in August 2027. So reporting, a lot of this is around reporting and making sure that you are ready to share your practice. I talked about these €1 billion fines. Will the EU AI Act be similar? Personally, I'm not too sure. I was involved in the UK government's white paper, and I think the UK government has stepped away for very good reasons. We've already got some legislation, we've got some controls through GDPR Article 22, which I will talk about in a moment. But mostly, I'm not too sure how we're going to prove this. It's not like data breaches where you can spot the person who committed the breach and you can identify the moment when that data leaked or was not cared for. But with AI, it's a very different situation. Very different. You've got so many steps between the user. You've got such complex supply chains that we work with. And I think this has been the main reason why the UK has been hesitant to launch AI regulation. If you think about it, here's you buy a service from usually a developer, usually a startup who's working with RAG to train it on a particular data set, or they might be fine-tuning a foundation model. They are fine-tuning a foundation model, and that's been developed by OpenAI, by Anthropic. Then, you know, Anthropic, where did Anthropic Claude get its data from? You've got data providers, data curators. And then we get down to the infrastructure where sometimes we saw last week, Amazon Web Services. You know, we can have a fault there that interrupts the service, which we saw, I don't know, did we see it worldwide? We saw it here in the UK, they saw it in America, where lots of systems went down. And so there's so many opportunities for fault. It's very challenging in AI to be able to identify who's responsible. I think with GDPR, the UK saw that it put off small players, it put off small to medium-sized enterprises. They got scared. They didn't have the lawyers and the expertise to tell them how to handle data within the law. And so they just, you know, decided not to participate, which is a shame. It's a missed opportunity. And just the complexity of AI is very, very different from data protection. So we will see whether the EU AI Act brings us a safer environment anytime soon. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. If you work in data, you know we have the black box problem. Lots of these neural nets are very difficult to pinpoint the root cause of anything, of any kind of error. We have, you know, it could be flawed design when you're creating a RAG model or when you're fine-tuning an AI model. It could come from biased data. It could come from emergent behavior. Lots of these machines are learning systems, and so they are still learning once they've been released on the market. So there is an opacity, a lack of clarity that I haven't seen legislators address and explain how they're going to get round. You've got a lack of legal precedent. So a lot of the laws on negligence are based on physical products where you can, again, pinpoint the person who is responsible in a supply chain. You know, it's a traceable defect. You can find which part was faulty and identify the responsible person. You can't do that with intangible software. We've got the problem of autonomous learning. These machines are still learning after they've been released, and that's incompatible with the law. Who's liable for the problem? Do we expect users to be monitoring them after the product has been sold in the market? So if you're looking at the new laws and you're thinking, I actually don't know how to comply with these, yeah, I think you have good reasons. And then, of course, we also have problems with the contracts as well. Many of these contracts have very broad exclusion clauses that leave massive gaps in liability. No one really knows clearly who is at fault if things go wrong. And I haven't seen any legislation we'll talk about a lot coming in that really addresses these challenges that AI brings to it. It is not GDPR, it is not data privacy, it's another beast. We do have a definition of AI, which, again, as someone who's been working in this area, lots and lots of people have not even tried to define AI, but this is the law and we need a definition of it. So a machine-based system that can operate autonomously. So that's quite a broad definition. And adapt after deployment. So this is the learning cycle. This is the idea that it's continuously learning. And it can generate outputs like prediction, which could be anything, quite honestly. It could be just a regression algorithm that's predicting a future change in the position of something, although that's quite explainable. Or it produces decisions. You get the mortgage, you don't, or you pay this mortgage rate, you don't. You know, that kind of decision. So we have a definition of what AI is. To go from. And some of you who work in the field of machine learning, you know, is it AI? Is it just a statistical process? I think we've got a little bit more clarity here to help us decide whether we're working with AI or not. It's not super clear. And previous definitions, if you are a fan of GDPR, Article 22, you'll know it started off just any probabilistic decision, which, you know, we use probability everywhere for everything. It was quite a broad definition, but it was, you know, the whole idea of explainability is big. So going into 2026, EU, in the European Union area, high risk, I think these are kind of obvious. Autonomous vehicles, profiling work performance, be really careful not to slip into these. There are things like Zoom, which will tell you if it will evaluate your performance during a meeting. Don't use it. Just stay away from it, ignore it, never use it. That's that's a high risk use. Robot assisted surgery, you know, most of them are not kind of obvious, not easy to fall into. We are getting a lot more legislation coming into effect, especially in the US, on chatbots that interact with natural persons, humans. Natural persons are humans. AI systems that generate synthetic audio and image. You know, we've had troubles with deep fake. We are finally getting some laws on that. And the EU is kind of in this limited risk area, and emotion recognition, which feels very old technology in 2025. It's getting regulated many years on. Okay, so EU. I think EU AI Act you should be familiar with, and if you haven't seen it yet, we have webinars on this recorded in our member site, and we also have a specific training course if you're not confident enough yet with the EU AI Act. We do have a whole training course for our members that you can access for free as part of your membership. Here's the one that's coming into effect in the UK now, I think actually this month. The Data Use and Access Act. Good news on this one. This one is actually relaxing the law rather than tightening it. I think for many of you, that will be a relief. Again, it's in response to the realization that smaller players, smaller organizations were not confident working with data because they were afraid of these very high, very punitive fines and scared of making a mistake easily. So this is the article that's being reviewed. This is the one that has controlled data, AI since 2018. So AI has always been regulated across Europe and Britain since 2018. Lots of people ignored this and didn't pay attention to it. So the Article 22 says the data subject, real people, have the right not to be subject to decision based solely on automated processing. profiling. You have the right not to be profiled if there is a legal effect concerning you. Okay, so a really easy example of this was I used to work in assessment, and we had tools that were pretty good at identifying malpractice, cheating behavior. They were pretty accurate, but we could never ever use them because they were black box techniques. And we couldn't say for sure that it was identifying malpractice. It looked like it was. It could have been using something else. That would be an example that has a legal effect. Deciding kids' exam results is a very important life process. What mortgage rate you pay, that was always the example. When back in 2018, you know, deciding what rate someone should pay for their mortgage, that should be something humans can go in and explain. They can use statistics, but they have to explain how they got to that decision. So under the new UK legislation, the Data Use and Access Act, which I think is in effect today, I think it's now, we've got lots of amendments to this automated decision-making process. This is really where the changes are. It's a more permissive framework around automated decision-making. So, for example, it will allow you to make automated decisions as long as sensitive data is not involved. So sensitive data would be health data, biometric data, your ethnicity, your religious associations. So it's got a much more permissive framework around that. We can now start to profile people and make decisions. But, and here's the but, there is a whole series of safeguards that you need to meet. And this is a lot around reporting. So, for example, we've got new safeguards. Let's jump into the details. If you wanted to give an approval or not for a loan, and you wanted to use, you're a bank and you want to use automated profiling for that decision. And in general, you're looking at the person's bank history and their record of payments, their credit scoring records, those kinds of things. You can do that with an automated system. You have to inform and communicate very clearly to your client that's what you're doing. So they know it's not a human, it's a machine. They have to explicitly consent, just like you have to consent to the use of your data. You have to now explicitly consent to automated decision making. And I would recommend, whatever automated decision process you run, I would recommend introducing explicit consent. It will protect you, it will safeguard you. You tell them, you ask them, just like you would with GDPR at the beginning of a website. The individual has to be allowed to express their point of view, ask, you know, why are you doing this? I don't agree, challenge it. And they can ask that a human review their case if they're not happy with being reviewed by a machine. So you can automate it, but you have to communicate clearly that you're automating it, get consent, and offer them an alternative. So transparency, again, a lot of the laws this year are around transparency. We're calling this subject access request, SARS, because, you know, we don't have enough acronyms in our field yet. So again, it's this, they still have the right to access and receive a copy of personal data held on them. This is GDPR, personal data, but there have been some problems with the company has to, you know, they have to wait for information from the requester. Maybe they didn't give, you know, they say, I want to know all my data, but they don't give enough information for you to go and find their data. There's a stop the clock option. So instead of you time running out on the time limit to respond and reply because the person who's asked for the information has not answered you, there's a stop the clock option there now. Again, making it easier for you as the data manager to meet the law requirements on that. So those are the two big areas where the UK is now moving away from GDPR a little bit, just a little bit. It's around automated decision making and around subject access requests. A few other aspects of GDPR that are becoming more relaxed in the UK. The police are getting a few more powers. They're higher than they've had before. Some cookie consent is relaxed, where it's only for statistical analysis and website functionality or security, not if you're going to sell the data on to third parties. That's not relaxed at all. And of course, if you are in Britain, you probably have customers in Europe, so why change? Personally, I would keep the same system. We have new rules for data protection tests for international data transfers. Oof. So I've been to so many conference meetings about data transfers. So say you go on holiday to, I don't know, let's go somewhere, Tenerife. Let's go somewhere lovely, Tenerife. We're on holiday, we have an accident, we have to go to the hospital. There's a lot of data that has to be transferred between my doctors back home, my insurance company, who I hope are going to pay to get me back home and pay for the cost of my healthcare. And then there's the hospital that's treating me, the doctors there that are treating me, they need to check some things. So there's a vast amount of very sensitive data traveling between me in the my business, my insurance company, my healthcare providers in the UK, and the Tenerife team. And trying to facilitate that, make it go more smoothly, has been the work of years, teams over years. There is this concept of materially lower, which means that the standards of some countries are obviously lower than the standards of others. That some countries have very strict laws on data protection and data transfer within organizations. Britain, Europe, California have very strict standards that we set. Other nations set much lower standards, and it's now going to impact our rating in the UK if we do an awful lot of transferring with countries where they're a bit too relaxed, quite honestly. So it's international pressure for everybody to bring their standards up. So there are some new rules. You'll have to go into it because data transfers is a huge international data transfers is a huge issue. But that's changing. We've got some changes in the rights of individuals to complain. They're strengthened. So as a company, you've got a little bit of relaxation, but the client has more rights to complain and request human intervention. There's been clarification that scientific research can include commercial research. So previously there were special relaxations for the academic community, our higher education researchers. Well, it's obviously in the national interest for us to support them with data and to help them to work with scientific research. It's been less clear whether research that's carried out in private businesses is research. Is it scientific research? Does it have to happen in a higher education organization, or can it happen in a private business? It can happen in a private business. We now have clarity over that. We've got new powers coming to the Information Commissioner to enforce the laws that remain, and we have new rules on child protection as well, where services are likely to be accessed by children. We'll talk about that next, because we're going on to California, the new laws in California, which I think they mirror very much the online harms bill of the UK from last year, where we're looking to reduce the negative impacts of online behaviour. Let me just check no questions yet. Please do pop any questions and I will try to answer them in the chat or the Q&A, and if I can't answer them, I'll get back to you later. Right, California. This is about 2 weeks old, I think, this law. I had to add this to my slides. It's so new. It came into effect, I think, at the beginning of October. It impacts only companies in the state of California, but hopefully you're thinking, ooh, quite a large number of tech companies have operations in California. So it covers a huge number of people globally, simply because of the technical and economic impact of the state of California. It comes into effect really fast, January the 1st. Wait till you see it. Wait till you see it, and you'll be really happy you're not working on the Google Gemini development team or the OpenAI development team or any of. You'll be really relieved. This is not your job. So this is around child protection and online harms. It's about taking more responsibility to reduce the negative impact. It comes from the realization that many people, particularly young people, are turning to chatbots to discuss very personal issues. Oh, and a quick warning, this contains a discussion of sexual harms. You may want to go away and make a cup of tea and come back in 5 minutes. So it was the realization that young people in particular are accessing chatbots when they should be accessing professional help. And sometimes these chatbots have encouraged extreme harmful behavior, such as suicidal thoughts, self-harm, those kinds of things. Or in particular, you have young people chatting to chatbots for 10 hours a day, clearly unhealthy. So it's around that problem. And quite honestly, I'm not sure how it's going. I've looked at the legislation. I'm not sure how it's going to work. I'm not sure how they're going to implement this. One thing is that they need to switch off access. That after I don't know, I think it's 4 hours, they have to say enough's enough. You've got to go and speak to a real person. It introduces finally laws about creating sexually explicit visual material. Up until now, the only country that has had a law that bans people creating pornographic images of real people has been the UK, and we only introduced it last year. California is introducing it. It has introduced it. It's in effect in January, so we may. At least it's illegal. At least you can actually prosecute somebody for doing this, which will be nice. Whether it stops it is another matter. They must clearly disclose that the chatbot is an AI, especially when a minor, someone under 18, is interacting. So it must. So, for example, WhatsApp chats, that kind of thing, incredibly harmful. In email interactions, you know, all of these attacks to try and blackmail people, those kinds of things, as well as the blackmail being illegal. Anytime an AI is chatbotting with an under 18, they must disclose that it's an AI. So it's and it doesn't matter how they interact, they have to disclose to the under 18-year-old that, oh, it's an AI. And they have to remind the child every 3 hours, which is really disturbing. They should not be chatting for 3 hours to a chatbot. But, you know, we have got some dating, some kind of romantic bots out there and things like that. So every 3 hours, it's got to remind the young person, I am not real. I'm not a human. I'm a machine. And there are provisions that they have to refer people who are showing signs of being in crisis to services that can support and help them to prevent self-harm. And this is just in response to, you know, some shocking cases. The Act comes into effect in January. Not 100% sure how it's going to work. It is quite challenging. But annual report, this is the big thing, annual reporting for AI developers is required from 2027. And this is where you might get involved, because you might have to evidence that you are complying with this law from 2027 onwards. And, you have to show that you're not required to comply. And so that's where you maybe have next year to work on planning this for the year ahead. Yeah, so although you probably don't do this, you may find you have to create a report to say you don't do this. And it's good. We want more protections for our young people. Colorado AI Act, not new, but it's effective in February. I think this, if anything, this goes a little bit further than the EU AI Act. Top level, it's any citizen of Colorado is affected. So again, if you have US customers, there's quite a high chance some of them live in Colorado and are therefore protected. So you do need to consider this, even if you're not Colorado based as an organization. This is protection for their citizens, not for their businesses. You need to take reasonable care to avoid discrimination in consequential decisions like employment, housing, and financial services. I'm hoping you're hearing EU AI Act, Article 22, GDPR Article 22. It's the same law again and again. It's this idea of making decisions by machines that are not transparent. You need to take care of not to have biased data, take care to make sure that the machine is making that decision fairly. Especially when it affects things like employment, all those recruitment algorithms that are sifting through CVs, that could be, your HR could get into trouble with this. It affects things like housing. So again, that's things like insurance premiums, mortgage rates, those kinds of things. This is quite easy to fall into these practices. Financial services as well. You may be working somewhere in insurance, banking, those kinds of areas. Same rules across the world. You've just got to take care to ensure that the machine is not discriminating. And again, I think our EU AI Act training will help you understand the Colorado AI Act as well, although it's not explicitly covered. I think where the Colorado Act goes a bit further is that it's got very explicit requirements around risk assessments and transparency. So reporting, transparency, risk assessments, you're going to have to be ready to provide these. And it's the theme throughout all of the legislation, the major legislation coming in next year in January, in a few weeks. It's all around transparency, risk assessment, reporting, helping to empower people to make decisions in the face of increased AI use. We have another law coming in the UK, some kind of law on AI is expected in May 2026. I think the UK has been hesitant because it's just so complex. I don't, it's so challenging to create a watertight law here, and we already have so many legacy laws that are still effective. A lot of this bill is likely to be on copyright. So where are you getting your data from? How are you training your machine? That issue hasn't really been resolved either by famous authors taking ChatGPT and OpenAI to court, or there's been this question mark over it. I think, was it last year, this year? We saw the OpenAI team explaining of course we took the data. How else were we going to make our machine without taking the data? But it's okay, no one's impacted. You broke the law. So we're getting a little bit of clarity in the UK around copyright. The voluntary code failed. The technical measures and standards are needed to identify this and measure the impact on AI development as well. I think I think the OpenAI team, I think Sam Altman had a point that if we don't do this, we're going to fall behind other countries that are developing this or other businesses that are developing this. So I think he's got a point. There are some good things coming out of AI development. So, you know, we do need to bear in mind, if we go too strict on copyright, is that going to really, really impede benefits that we might have? It will require disclosures on how AI developers access copyright works, which will be interesting how they, again, really think yourself lucky you're not working for OpenAI or Anthropic Claude or those ones at this point in time. I don't know how they're going to do that retrospectively with data they've already collected. We'll see. But it could be licensing, and I think this is a good way forward, because that reassures people with valuable works that they are not going to get completely ripped off. They're not just going to have their, you know, and I think it has been terrifically unfair to creative individuals, and we risk destroying the creative arts. So we're going to get licensing and new suggestions on how to enforce copyright. That will be exciting because it's a very, very complex project that they're trying to implement. There's the deadline for a progress report. They've set themselves a deadline for 6 months. They should be refining this over the winter, and we're expecting it early spring next year, maybe, leading to new laws, leading to next October's legislative roundup. I expect it will be ready in time for October 2026. But again, if you are currently developing RAG systems, if you are currently fine-tuning an LLM, bear in mind that the free-for-all on copyright is coming to an end. And you do need to make sure that ethically you're sourcing your data in the correct way. So that's one too. I don't think we have many people building foundation models, but I think we do definitely have people building solutions on top of foundation models. And if you're interested, we actually have a course on LLM engineering to turn you into an LLM engineer, where there's big money. So so please do, yeah, we've got new courses on that. Again, part of your membership, do sign up. You're probably not building an LLM if you're on a talk about legislation. Okay, so those are the big ones that are coming next year. They're a quieter year compared to previous years. It's going to be a lot quieter. It's more tweaking rather than radically changing the law, but reporting is becoming everything. And I think we saw that in that statistic from Gartner at the beginning this week, you know, that 65% of chief information officers, chief data officers, leaders are really taking this extremely seriously as a priority. I think if you are working for a smaller organization, take a lesson from that. This is the direction we're going in. We've got to make sure that governance is at the top of our considerations. Right. Thank you very much. I have no questions at the moment. Can I do a little plug for future webinars we have coming? They're really around HE and students, actually, in November. We've got our sprint launch. If you're a student member, or if you know a student member, it's our competition for students, so they can compete internationally. Wonderful opportunity. And this time it's actually really going to help them with their career. It's looking at the practical task of data job interviews. I'm delivering a talk about making the most of data in higher education towards the end of the month. And then we have another student webinar, which is to help them with advice going from a university degree to getting that first job, getting that foot in the door and building a career. So please do sign up for those webinars, or tell someone you know to come along to them for November. We've got some fun ones coming in December as well, because it's December. Please do follow us on Facebook, follow us on LinkedIn if you haven't already, where we can keep you updated on these things. And it also, of course, helps us. We deliver these webinars for free because it's part of our job to promote excellence in the data field. But it's always nice if we can get more followers on our socials. Okay, thank you so much. Let me stop sharing there. Please do, if you have any questions, I think you have my email when you signed up for the webinar. So if you have any questions and you're a bit shy to ask them in the webinar, please do contact me and I'll be happy to get back in touch with you. And if you are thinking of becoming a member, if you're not yet, we are a not-for-profit. We do a lot of work to support the wider community, but with our members, we can always do that little bit more and have that little bit closer and more special relationship. So please do consider membership if you're not yet. Thank you very much. Have a lovely evening, and I hope to see you next time.